Gracious God, we give thanks for this pause in our regular days to come and look at how you and your Holy Spirit are working through us, and the wind is blowing in new ways. Give us a sense of open imagination about the models that we hear discussed today and the stories that are shared. Give us a sense of being able to imagine how you and your Spirit may want to work in the lives of our churches. We pray that as we move forward, that you help us to find the resources that we need and the people that we need to align ourselves with to be partners in that journey. In Christ's name, amen. So I'm going to embarrass him and start by saying welcome to Jeff McDonald. Those of you who were here for our great launch, we had 385 people signed up for that. And then, as Jeff knows, we got locked out because stupid Zoom gave the extended account to my partner's account instead of mine. We had, I said when I sent out the apology, I said, pray for the Zoom person that I get. Anyway, that was recorded for all of those of you who have been registered, and you're still able for about another week. At the end of the month is when that'll come down. But in the meantime, his book, Our Time is Plenty, is a terrific resource. And I know a lot of you have been buying it. So I continue to recommend that book to you. Get on Amazon. The period for the discount's over, but you can find it clearly on Amazon and other places. Jeff, if you want to post another place where you make more money off of it than on Amazon, feel free to do that in the chat.
I don't know of such a place, but I may find a link for just to make it handy. So
okay,
it's great to be with you for this topic again, and to be with everybody today.
Well, we have had such overwhelming supportive response for the series. People say, really, you're going to do a series about that? So we had Jeffrey did our launch, and the end of September, near the end of September, and then we've had a series of 8 that we put together on emerging models as follow-up. And the original part of this design, I'll tell you this, and then I'll introduce our guests for today, was to, it started with a pilot program in the Synod of the Pacific, where I am. And we did it with Cascades Presbytery, which is essentially most of Oregon. And they have a lot, they have 90 some odd churches up there. We ran that for about 6 months, and then we tweaked what we did and took it to the whole Synod. So all the 10 presbyteries in my Synod were able to work with me on a more one-on-one basis in the second phase of the grant. It's a grant out of the Transformational Congregations grants in Louisville. And then we had posted that phase 3 was going to be to take it to the national church. And this is us taking it to the national church. We've gotten great response on we polled you, the registrants, as to about 12 different emerging models. And these are the top 8 that came up. All of them, there was a nice sort of break in it because all of them were well over 100 people saying, I want to follow that one. And what we have found is that several people are following many of them. Because one of the things we suggested, wouldn't it be good if we could have like an ongoing cohort about that model for people who are in that lane working on that in their church? And then we got pushback saying, no, 2 things wrong with that, Deborah, which our funders said, okay, shift, pivot, that's what we're about. It was that we are over cohorted. The clergy also would have said we are over cohorted in our lives right now. And that clearly is, I've been using Zoom professionally for 10 years. But a lot of those folks were saying that, since COVID, they are over cohorted and over Zoomed. And the other one was, they said, there are several lanes we want to follow, and we don't have the time to do them all. So there will be a poll question that I'll put up in just a second, where we are polling you to see what sort of follow-up would best suit your needs. In light of that, I will say that we're about at a little over the halfway point now. There are 3 more following it. The first one was for part-time clergy. And we did not post the recording of that because we sort of said Vegas rules in that one. And they, as a matter of fact, are continuing to go on. I'm going to ask for Sam in Idaho to, well, I'm going to mute Sam in Idaho is what I'm going to do. I got the power to do that. If that was mine, I couldn't. There are 2 or 3 of you that aren't muted. If you could all mute, that would be good. And then, but we're recording all of these others, and they are, the following Monday, they are posted And I will put the link in the chat once our guests start telling their stories. I'll pull up and paste into the chat the link to where all of those are. It has this full schedule, and it has all the recordings of the ones that we've done thus far. We are hoping that at some point we can find a place within the denomination to also lodge those materials and the resources. I was about to work with Catherine Threadgill, and then she left her job in Louisville and took a new job as a dean of one of our seminaries. So that place is vacant right now. So I'm searching around in Louisville for the right person to talk to about getting some things structurally set up for us to have resources curated really at the denominational level, which is where they belong. Okay, with that, I'm going to throw up the poll that I have. There's it. And this is a quick one. If you've been with us before, you know what I'm doing. Let's first get the right poll, Deborah. It's the tipping the scales. We call this tipping the scales. It's sometimes referred to, and I guess in the 1001 New Worshiping Communities, they call it parallel plant. But it isn't always a new plant situation, but it's the notion of sort of a conscious marriage of two different ministries. And I have worked through the years with churches who knew they were aging out and knew that they were, that the life of their church needed to take a new direction, but they didn't have the energy or lifespan, as some of them admitted, to pull it off. But they had studied their community and they knew what was needed. And they said, what we would most like to have happen is some group to come along that wants to be in this space and to eventually tip the scale and take over and be the congregation or the worshiping community that the property belongs to and the governance belongs to. So that's the scale that we're tipping. They don't all work out the same way. It's a spectrum of options, and I'm curious to hear the two that we have invited to the table today. But first, I will post up this launch. It's got two questions. The first is a single choice. The second one is multiple choice. Can you guys see the poll? Okay, scroll down and you can answer to see all of question two. But the first one has to do with the category that you're in. Which of these people are you? And oh, we have an other. That's good. I'm always really curious who the others are. But check which one these come in. We'll just do a quick run of the poll. The second question is about the options for follow-up. A cohort, as I say, our track record is we're finding most people that's not their first choice, but others that are sort of saying that the other two options, one of them looks good to them especially. So I'll give it another. We've got maybe another less than a minute, I think, or when we hit the maximum. I'll see. We're up to 70% who checked in already. The other day, I stupidly sat here and waited for the last person to check their boxes and realized it was me. So I have a little Luddite in my DNA. Okay, I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to go to the responses. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So we only have two who are currently involved in a parallel plant. I'm guessing Beth is one of them, and Alicio, I know if you checked that box or counted yourself as not, that current doesn't apply anymore. We don't have any lay ministry involved in that, but we have a lot of clergy and laity who are interested in exploring that. And then we have some others. We like others. Again, we get the response that we have everywhere else says, I want a toolkit. And let me say, just as an ad on the side, because I served on their board of trustees for 8 years, many moons ago, the Presbyterian Foundation, if you're not aware of the fact that at their website, they have what I think is one of the best resource centers in the denomination. In just the homepage of presbyterianfoundation.org, you will see the thing that says toolbox or toolkit. I can't remember which word they use, but if you pull that, you can pull down and have just a ton of different really hands-on resources. They will give you templates of things like setting budgets and like figuring out obviously a whole stewardship thing, but assessment of your property and you know, what are ideas that you can look forward to using and everything. And just really practical things. I've pushed Paul Greer as the head of Project Regeneration. And he will actually be on our panel next week when we look at bivocational campuses. So if you're interested in tiny homes ministry or low-income housing projects, those are all very chic ideas that different churches are trying these days. But we go from the smaller end. I will have Katie Stenda, who as a guest, who just took their own campus and worked herself into a seamless job of community service center and a church side by side, with her working as the director of both of them. So we'll go from the small to the huge sort of imagination things. So anyway, thank you for your response. We're in the right lane. We are going to be developing a curated set of tools, of resources on each of the models. So I'll pull that out. And then let me introduce our two people. Some of you who were on early, oops, I still have some in the waiting room. See, I'm so bad at that. There, let them in. We have two guests with us today that whose stories I don't know. I've known the stories of everybody else, so I could have told you whether they were telling it well or not. They were telling it before, but I haven't heard these stories. I've only heard them on recommendation of Nikki Collins, who runs the 1001 New Worshiping Communities program for us. I've worked with Nikki for many years, and I went and said, okay, I need one for this topic, tipping the scales, because I've seen it from my end of the small church end. I want to hear it from the other end of the scale tippers who came in. And she said, oh, my top two names, Beth McCaw, who was called to lead Telos at Southminster in Nashville, Tennessee, in the way that I've described. And she didn't give me much more information than that. So Beth, I hope you'll fill us in when I call on you first. And then after her, Alicio Morales was called to serve the Morningside Presbyterian Church in Fullerton, California, which is in Los Ranchos Presbytery, and to start a new worshiping community alongside of it, that they again use the language parallel start. He is no longer there. He'll show up in his Navy uniform, and he probably has to leave a few minutes early because of the Navy, but that's okay. He's a Navy chaplain now, but we're glad to grab him back to have him share his story and his experience with us. So with that, Beth, I unmute yourself and we'll turn it over to you. Maybe 12, 15 minutes of telling us your story of how you got into this, the good, the bad, and the ugly of your experience there.
There's plenty of all of those. First, thank you all for having me. And as I was reminded by someone in the chat, I am not the other Beth McCaw who taught at Dubuque Seminary. She's been around a lot longer in the PCUSA than I have, but there are two of us that are ordained named Beth McCaw. If I were to pick a verse that describes this experience, it's Isaiah 30:21. If you stray to the right or the left, you will hear a word that comes from behind you. This is the way, walk in it. And it seems to me that I have spent the last 5.5 years with one foot in the air, waiting for the voice, so I know where to put it. I finished at Vanderbilt Divinity School in December of 2016 and spent the first part of 2017 looking for a place to land for my first call. I'm a second career pastor. Watched way too much NCIS. Knew I had watched too much NCIS when I realized that I was praying for the characters who are fictitious, you know. Anyway, I didn't consider myself an entrepreneur, couldn't spell it. I am geographically bound because of my husband's work, and there was a myth on the CLC for anybody who's not Presbyterian that is, it's like eHarmony for churches and pastors, and it was local, so I thought, well, I may as well call. 45-minute conversation later, I was really excited and really curious. Did a lot of internet research and truly stumbled across 1001 and all of the resources of that. Decided that is exactly the information I needed. Talked to John Moore, who I know some of you probably know. He connected me with Sarah Hayden, who was in Atlanta at the time, and she suggested I apply for what was then an apprenticeship, which would involve me being in a local context with coaching and support from 1001. So I had this parallel process of applying to the church in the call process and getting this apprenticeship set up. So I arrived here at Southminster in May of 2017, on the exact day that there was a childcare crisis. Administratively, no children were harmed in the formation of this new worshiping community, I promise. The crisis, it's a very long story, but they had shut down the daycare, and very abruptly. And the parents all got together and said, please, please, please keep it open. So there was a meeting my first day. I didn't even know where the light switches were. And I said, is there anything I can do? And one of the people said, could you come be a calm presence? And I, having been a therapist for 25 years, I was like, well, I can do that. And so I sat through this meeting. And what became very clear was how disconnected this church was with its neighborhood. And I was hired not to be the pastor of Southminster, but to start a new worshiping community. Long story short, we ended up in a meeting with the session and saying, can we do what they're asking us to do to keep this open? They eventually said yes. And then all of a sudden I was the spokesperson, which had not been the intention. I mean, it was kind of a scandal in Nashville, like the news cameras were in the parking lot kind of scandal. It wasn't great. Went back out. I was very aware that we had 20 some in worship that morning at Southminster. And then like 75 people with a lot of little kids were walking into the building that afternoon. And, I figured I needed to definitely capitalize on that opportunity if there were any way possible. So went back out and said, yes, we will try to keep this thing open. Someone I was flying by the seat of my pants, as I've done a lot, and saying, these areas, people who want to help in these areas go to these places. And someone said, well, how are we going to know if we're going to reopen after this week of being closed? And I heard myself saying, I don't know, y'all want to have a potluck? And immediately thought, that's the dumbest thing I've ever said. But we did. And breaking bread together has been a huge part of who we are since. I had a month before I was going to be ordained and also go to New Worshiping Leader Camp. And I said, I will help any way I can. We did. I spent that week using my therapist skills and helping people talk to one another and clarify things, and kept the daycare open. I had 10 to 12 days in a row without a day off, 10 to 12-hour days of working, not a sustainable ministry model at all. But when I came back from New Worshiping Community Camp, all these parents I had connected with, I started saying, hey, you want to go to coffee? And I did not know it at the time, but apparently the word on the street was, if Pastor Beth asks you to go to coffee, you go. So did a lot of coffee and asked everyone, would you be interested in being part of a group that got together to talk about, what church could be? And we ended up with a group of about 12 of us, started meeting in July, met in August of that year. The part-time pastor, designated pastor for Southminster started. I started in May. She started in August. On the floor of Presbytery, because Telos at Southminster did not yet exist, really. When she was approved for that position, they added to her job description, she would be head of staff, which is not something she wanted, and it wasn't on the contract she signed. So that's important for later. So we had these two parallel communities. Telos at Southminster made up entirely of people deeply hurt by the church, wanting to have some connection, but not wanting to be in a traditional church, and Southminster, who was very traditional, PCUSA, worship Sunday at 11, etc. Well, here were the problems that I think are really important to look at. Nobody asked the hard questions of this conversation, of the existing congregation, of with limited resources, when it comes down to one or the other of these things, which ministry takes priority? Nobody clarified what is the ultimate goal of this new worshiping community. There were 3 parallel narratives running through the existing congregation. The new worshiping community would go off and become a separate congregation. The new worshiping community existed to funnel new members to the existing congregation and therefore revive it, or the new worshiping community would gradually take over for Southminster as they aged. Those cannot all be true at the same time. And those conversations had not been had, so it was very confusing. And then what is Southminster's understanding of itself? That was not clear at the time. So we had a part-time designated head of staff, a full-time called and installed associate, me. How do we work together? How do we do this? 2018, 2019, we went along. Telos grew. We gradually realized our Sunday afternoon, twice a week meetings were not sustainable as people's kids got older, and went to Sunday mornings at 9. That was really hard for our folks because we had been meeting in the fellowship hall and they preferred not being in the sanctuary. And so one of our worship times, we took a field trip with a lot of prayer to the sanctuary and talked about what this space could and should be for God's people. Tried to just address that. So, of course, March 2020 happened, and we did what everybody did. We pivoted hard and pivoted very fast. But also the administrative structure broke down. The model, the lack of those conversations, the lack of clarity, it broke down, and hard conversations were had. And at the end of her contract, the end of June of 2020, the part-time pastor left. I offered to, this was height of pandemic. This would have been July of 2020. I offered to fill the pulpit and did that for 16 months, was in limbo. And we rearranged administratively finally in October of 2021 and merged the congregations. I am the pastor of Southminster Presbyterian Church as of about a year ago. As of this past August, we merged our services into one service at 10 a.m. And I don't have to tell you that all of that involved a lot of conversations, a lot of fears, a lot of trepidations. There's still a lot to iron out. We've had some spectacular failures. We've had some good successes. One thing that has been amazing in bringing our congregation together is pumpkins. We decided to have a pumpkin patch, and unloading a semi full of pumpkins with everybody there showed us we could solve problems together, that we could do things together. Christmas Eve services, we've done those together from the beginning because the older congregation had no children. Telos had a lot of children, and they love the idea of having Christmas Eve. So we have a no rehearsal Christmas pageant every Christmas Eve. Excuse me. We have a hybrid worship model. We've continued since the pandemic. And so we have Zoom and in-person worship simultaneously. And our session is now solidly just over half these new folks. And one of the greatest moments for me was watching 4 people kneel to be ordained as elders, each of whom had told me at one time they would never darken the door of the church again. And that was really, really special. Currently, we are looking at repurposing our land. We are on a very busy corner in Nashville, and have several acres. We're looking at possibly starting a coffee shop in our empty parsonage or manse, expanding our childcare because it's full with a 2-year waiting list, as most childcares are. And then we have an empty lot on which we're looking at affordable housing of some kind. So that's kind of where we are. One thing they asked as we applied for our final New Worshiping Community grant is this an existing congregation that is absorbing a new worshiping community? And no, it is not, because this new group is not what either one was before. There's been a lot of change to meet where we are. And they gave me a little bit of a hard time because our name is Southminster Presbyterian Church. And the reason for that is that we are in Nashville, Tennessee, and we are surrounded by one name, seeker-friendly, very highly produced worshiping communities. And our folks do not want anything to do with that. There are 3 rules they gave me when we started this whole thing was no rock bands, no smoke machines, and no beach balls. Beach balls? What? Apparently that's a thing.
1001 started with beach balls at General Assembly. Just
Did
so
it
you know.
really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's hilarious. I've never heard that before. So we stuck with Southminster because it's not cool. It's never been cool. It's never gonna be cool. We're just going with it. We're just embracing it. And that is where and who we are. I hope I stayed somewhat within the time.
Thank you, Beth. I have about 8 questions already, but I'm going to let Alicia share first. And by the way, everybody else who's got the same, their 8 questions, post your questions in the chat, and I'll start monitoring those after we hear Alicia's story and we come back to him. So there's Alicia in his Navy vest. And as I said, he was called to serve the Morningside Presbyterian Church in Fullerton and Los Ranchos Presbyterian in Southern California. And to launch a new worshiping community alongside of them. So tell us the good, bad, and the ugly of your experience there, Alicia.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you're at. Again, my name is Alicia Morales, and I am from the Los Ranchos Presbytery. I grew up in it. My dad was a minister there since the year 2000. So it was always part of my upbringing. And when I went to seminary at Princeton, I knew that I wanted to come back to Los Ranchos, so I did that. And I worked at a few churches as their director of youth ministries. And then when Morningside Presbyterian Church decided that, they finally gave in, I would say, or admitted that they were aging, that they didn't have the energy to revitalize themselves, to start something new within their own congregation. They said, well, let's open our doors and our ministry, our resources, our campus for whatever it is that God has in store for this area. And if you ever want to look online to their website, you can kind of see the campus. It's a beautiful campus. It's huge. I think it's 3 acres, and it's very rare in a city of Orange County for a church to have that much greenery. So they said, we are going to do whatever it is. And I think that was the key to that ministry. And if I were to use a verse that would orient when I started, it's not even from the Bible, it's from the Lord of the Rings. When Frodo takes the ring, he says, like, I'll take the ring, though I do not know the way. That's kind of what I said. So like, I'll take this ministry, though I do not know what I'm doing. Because as a youth director that focused more on like younger lives, I didn't know what a parallel start would look like, because on paper it said that 75% of my time, I think that's how we divided it, 75 or 80% would be towards this new ministry, and the other percent would be towards the aging ministry that, they said they would step to the side but still want to be ministered to. When I got there on a good Sunday, you get like 15 people, 15 members. By the time I left, it was around 40 within a year. And along the way, we realized that there was still a lot of life left in the church. So the idea was to move the older generation to the chapel that they had, and then rent out the bigger sanctuary to a church that could pay rent, right? So that we can admit that it's smaller, it doesn't need that much space. And they did that. But then my goal was to bring in, a younger ministry. So I reached out to the campus ministries. Fullerton Presbyterian Church is literally in the middle of Cal State Fullerton and Fullerton City College. So I reached out to the InterVarsity Church campus ministry, and I told them, hey, I don't want you guys to start a ministry here at the church, because that's usually what pastors want out of those campus ministries. They say, hey, we'll give you a space, but you have to start a college group here. So it's kind of a give and take. I said, I don't care if you start a ministry. I don't care if it's Presbyterian. Here is this building that we're not using. Do with it what you need to. And sure enough, on a monthly basis or weekly basis, we would have like 100 college kids on our campus, and they loved our campus because they saw how green it was. They were able to just break off into small groups, do prayers. And what I did is I asked them to check into the church, because I started an Instagram page for the church and a Facebook page. So then when the young people would, when they would check in, it would create what's called a hotspot on social media, so that people would say like, hey, there's something happening at Morningside Presbyterian Church. So that's how we kind of got into the radar of the people in the area. What also helped was that the Presbytery was fully on board with this. They gave us $150,000 to do this. So it was a perfect gift of resources, and the Edgy congregation, to their willingness to say, do whatever it is you want to do with this building. We're not going to fight you. And I did that. I took away the podiums. We painted the sanctuary, the back wall black, so that the new church could feel modern. The parlor that they had a fireplace. We tore it down. We did the new flooring. And I know that they were sad about it, but they were happy about the life that was coming into it. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't going to change much of how they worship. So we never took away their hymns. We didn't take away their organ. We didn't take away the liturgy. That was their biggest fear. And I said, all of this is valuable. This means a lot. Help us understand why. And they did. And they also understood why change needed to be made. So it was their complete willingness to change everything. And it was my willingness to understand why it was, why they wanted to keep it. And I mean, I'm sure you've all heard it where younger people say like, well, we just need to wait until the older people leave the church so that we can change whatever it is that we want. And it's toxic. I know. I've talked to a lot of young people who believe that. But the reality is, if you take the time to listen to their stories, they're beautiful, right? There was a cross in the sanctuary that I wanted to get rid of. And they said yes. But then, when I asked more, it turns out that one of the members' husband, who passed away, built that cross, right, in his own workshop, like in the 70s. So it wasn't that they bought that cross. It wasn't that it was made by hand by a member of the church. And to this day, that cross is still there because it meant to them. And I understood that it was valuable, that it meant something to them. And I chose not to get rid of it for that reason. So all those are the good things about it. The hard part about the Parallel Start project is that the whole 80-20% never worked out, right? Because there was so much life left in this congregation that, we started off with 15. One Sunday we had 60, right? That was the height of it. Then it went down to 40 and it just hovered around 30 to 40, all within a year, right? So all the people who were discouraged by the church, who didn't want to go back to the church, they saw the life that was coming back into the church. And they came back. So the question was like, well, if they're willing to put more effort, are we just going to let them go away? I said no. So then I kept ministering to them, kept creating programs for them, and it worked out perfectly. More resources came, right? When more people come, more tithes come in. So we had more resources now. At the same time, I was still doing this Parallel Start project. And that was hard balancing the time and effort. And then the funds for the grant was like, okay, well, 80% of the funds have to go towards this new Parallel Start project. 20% of it has to go to the old congregation. How does that work out? How do we break down those receipts and those expenses? If both of them use it, is it one can use it, the other one can't? And that was really hard. Thank God for the people that we had at the church who had been working at the church who understood roughly how to handle it, right? So that was the hard part about it. The other one was that it was also, there was a preschool there. And we talked a lot about the Parallel Star Project, but we never talked about the preschool. All of a sudden, I applied to be the solo pastor of a Parallel Star project. I ended up being, the head of staff of a preschool. Never did I think I was going to do that, but we did. And a lot of our resources, I decided to go back into that preschool because it was a big source of income and a big ministry to the community. A lot of our teachers were there for 15, 16, 20 plus years. And we decided, the session decided with my push, we have to invest more into it. We painted the rooms, we bought new furniture, we got new things, and it turned everything upside down for the teachers. We started community programs during the winter where we would do parking lot movie nights. So drive-in movie nights, big hit in the community. People that never went to the church, they just saw the sign that said, hey, there's a movie night, just come park your car. We're not trying to minister to you. And people from the community came and they loved it. And then they asked more questions about the church and what we were doing. So all of these things came out of the desire to do new things and the church's willingness to say, do it. We don't understand it. We don't know how we're going to get it done, but we're going to get it done. And we did, and it all worked out just fine. Unfortunately, obviously with COVID, it changed everything. So in my heart of hearts, my mind of mind, I knew that we were bleeding money, right? As a lot of churches were, and I was the biggest expense. And I realized that my expense was hurting, how much the teachers were going to get raised, what could be done to the building, all these other things. So I decided to step down because I always had a plan B, right? The Navy was always something that I could fall back onto. Some of the teachers didn't have a plan B, right? So I said, I'd rather secure the church's preschool, the church's future with all of its new energy and all that to someone else. So I stepped down, joined the military, and to this day, that Fullerton is still going strong, still there. People thought I was going to close down, in a year or two, and nope, it has the same energy. I don't know what that Parallel Start project looks like now. I know what it looked like back then, but that church that everyone thought was going to close down, it bounced back. And I really believe it's because it said we have nothing to lose, everything to gain. And they did that. They trusted me, they trusted the Spirit. And lastly, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed was, we made a joke in seminary that every young minister thinks they're going to go into the church and try to change it. They can't even change the font in the bulletin because churches are just stubborn. I came in there, I changed the logo, I changed the vision, the mission of the church, all within the first month. I redesigned the entire website by myself because I taught myself how to do that. The social media, all of that within 1 month, it was completely different. I changed the color of the church, right? And again, the church's willingness to say, okay, it is what it is. Let's go ahead and do it. And it all worked out just fine. So I learned that older generations are flexible when they finally realize that things need to change. And me and my peers realized that older generations have so much to offer, not just their tithes, right? Their wisdom, their stories, their experience. And it was just great. I hope more churches do Parallel Start projects because it really unifies generations and it pushes the church forward. So that's all I got.
Oh, you got a lot, Alicia. I got another set of questions for you. So let me just tell you what I jotted down in the beginning of yours, Beth, in terms of the toolkit situation. I said, okay, put in the toolkit a whole set of questions of things not to do. Don't just put what to do, put in what not, like, don't try this. And Alicia's, what I love too about yours is that you gave us a whole list of heresies that you pulled off. And that's what, church sort of heresies, not theological ones, which is like painting it, moving pews, taking pulpits, doing this, doing that. And the nothing left to loseness, we have a lot of churches that feel that way right now. And so that can be something that we can play off as a strength, I think, in a lot of what we do. But the spirit that you suggested of helping each of the two congregations understand what their risk muscle was in terms of being adaptive was an important piece of what I heard you describe too. I want to back up and ask a couple of questions of Beth to draw out some more from you. When did South Minster call you as someone, or did the presbytery send you to them? How did that sort of happen?
Southminster realized that, like many congregations, they were shrinking and aging, and they, with the previous pastor, they came up with this idea of having someone come in and start a new worshiping community. The idea being that that former pastor would be a mentor to this position, but 2 years later, the pastor had retired about
Life
6
had
months
changed.
before I got
Yeah.
there.
Okay, all right. Another thing that I thought was so powerful that you described of the field trip to the sanctuary, because you knew you were working with a community of people who'd been wounded by the church. And it's sort of like, if we're going to bring you back, we have to bring you back on understanding, you know, and you with the background as a therapist, we're well suited to help them with that. I think that much of our growth edge in churches these days is in those, if we are the church in that center of a target, and the next one out, or what I call the duns, people who used to be part of the church and they're done with us for 1,000 reasons. And then the nuns, the none of the aboves, is that set of folks that the church has wounded is a tricky one, but one that I think if we can say, here's a place in the church that maybe isn't like the church you were in and won't wound you, feels differently. I don't know if any of you saw at General Assembly or seen the video about the Reverend Bethany, who's a TikTok ministry of over 400,000 people now. She's just taken a call in Denver Presbytery that said, we would like to back you to have that be your entire ministry, is social media sort of stuff. But she generally sort of went on TikTok and started a set of videos aimed at people who have either never seen the inside of a church in their life or were wounded and excluded by it, LGBT being a huge portion of those. But also the circle of people who are ex-evangelicals, self-named these days, of people looking for, is there a place I can land where I can really find, you know, I was in a presbytery meeting in Central Valley here in California the day that Rachel Held Evans died, and it went out, and we were just frozen with sadness over that. She was a Pied Piper of those folks. If you don't know who she was quite eloquent in her writing about it. And like Alicio, like you've described this, and like, you know, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And that's where you can sort of open the windows and let the Holy Spirit come in the ways it's going to be, in some wonderful ways. We have a set of questions that I want to pay attention to yours and not just mine here. Art asked a couple of questions. Art Amon, at the beginning, he said, do parallel populations ever mingle? I'm guessing it's sometimes and sometimes not. And then he later asked, what was the community in Nashville like? Was it growing in population, et cetera? So either one of you can respond to that and speak not just for yourselves, but other colleagues in the new worshiping community about what you've seen in those.
I can go ahead. So for my in my parallel start, we did because they needed each other. The older generation needed singers. They needed people to do a lot of the technical things. So rather than have, you know, 2 separate groups where each group would have people from the other group help the other group, it made no sense, because then they'd all be at the same 2 different services. So then just put them together. So mine did purposely every Sunday. And then what was the other one?
Wait, let me ask you, did you worship? The other one was about Nashville, but did you all worship during COVID? Were you hybrid the whole time, or did you have some in person, or did you completely shut down and were mostly online?
For about 7 months, we were all in person, which is
Wow.
what a lot of the growth. And then when COVID started, I recorded and edited and posted the videos for those who knew how to see the videos, whether it's YouTube or social media. And then I also printed out a bulletin and sent them out to all those who didn't have a computer, whatever it was. So it was the same message, same liturgy, just on paper.
Okay, but no live worship, like not Zoom or Facebook
No.
Live worship during that period. Okay,
We didn't have enough resources for that.
okay. Beth, I'll throw you the question about the community in Nashville. Was it growing in population? Because I know a lot of our churches that are on here are saying, yeah, that's really good, except that, you know, our population is vacated. I'm working with a church, Alacia, on Mare Island, and the Navy left Mare Island. I remember when it was a very thriving community, but that church now we're looking at, maybe you're the right place for tiny homes for homeless Navy vets, you know, because the folks are still around there or something. But the notion of when your community is shrinking, it's hard to know what to put there. But go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, before the pandemic, my daughter is a realtor, and she told me that about 700 people a day were moving to Nashville. So Nashville is growing incredibly fast. So the community, yes, is growing very quickly around us, and we are in a spot where we moved over here from the other side of town. My husband and I moved over here about 6 months after I started at the church, and our eyes still kind of bug out at what's happening with real estate right around us, right around the church.
Wow. I think too the notion of the respect for the traditional aging congregation, and the notion that many times what they just want is, we want a chaplaincy in place while we are ready to tip the scales and towards the new parallelism. And I think there are a lot of different models that presbyteries can do. I know some presbyteries are looking at a model of having a permanent chaplaincy position or two, or parts of 2 or 3 of semi-retired people who sort of say, if what's going on in your congregation, either you want to give up the building or you want the building to be given up towards something else, that you deserve to have the person who buries you know you, and we can easily put some of those proceeds of a sale of something towards chaplaincy, that you will know that person and stuff. I want to back up and see, it's a long thread. Deborah Smith, I'm going to ask you if you're willing, Deborah, you've got a great story here. Tell the story to us rather than just the long thread of it, because it sounds like it's very, very vibrant. Where did you
This
go?
has all just started within the last couple of weeks. We're a small church, older. We worship about 35 to 40.
Where are you?
We are just south of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Sort of a rural area becoming suburban. But this family, these 2 families came in. They're Russian, Ukrainian, German, and they're Grace Baptist Church, actually. One family has 10 kids, the other has 11. And the father of the one family is a pastor, and they are looking for a place to worship. And say they are wanting to use our church building at times when we're not using it for worship, for fellowship, for Bible study. And so we are in the process of trying to figure out a contract, and how do we connect with them. I think there's a great opportunity to learn about another culture, to learn about, and also even to share worship. I talked to a pastor who had hosted them in the past. He said they did Christmas Eve together. The kids in this family all play musical instruments like strings and, and they said that they would be willing to help us provide some music at times for our worship. But one of the things that I'm thinking about is, yeah, we're going to need somebody to connect with them on a facility basis, but I want to make sure, how do we connect with them on an ongoing basis? We may not really worship together, but how do we occasionally have fellowship together? How do we, be together since we share a building? How can we get to know each other? One of the things I worry about is that when you have 2 different cultures, and you see somebody doing something and you don't quite understand it, you kind of make up intentions and things. And I want to make sure that we have an ongoing relationship so that we don't make assumptions about things. We have a connection with them, and we can work through whatever might come up. Any advice or anything that anybody has on this, because this is all very new for us.
Well, we have resources for what that seems to be in the lane of sort of multicultural sharing of communities, and trans-denominational too, which is a growing thing. And what I really hear you saying is, and which we took in the Designing for the New Norm grant, we said in year 2 of it within the Synod, that we wanted to all adopt the spiritual practice of what I've always called conscious intention, where we're just not landlord and tenant, whether it's in your own life or in the life of the congregation, to say conscious intention is a spiritual practice. It's a sense of consciously seeking through prayer and committing and through covenant intention what it is you're trying to create, which does not say we're laying it in concrete. We're saying we're agreeing to be malleable, adaptable, as is sort of the word of the work that I use, and nimble. Everyone's epiphany word was nimble that year. And that's part of growing into that I think you're suggesting. So I'm going to point you, Deborah, to some multicultural resources that I think would be especially helpful in yours. Alicia, before we lose you especially, I'd love for you to share with us the notion. You said you don't know what they're doing now, and I get it, the boundary thing of, I've left, the new people have to do what they're doing. But what I see as being very helpful sign is that I know that some of the 1001 folks have had to recognize that there are ministries that don't go beyond the funding period. They don't make that bridge hop. And clearly yours has. You had funding from the Presbyterian backing from it too. But you recognized beautifully what your community was, and were willing to have the existing congregation that probably wasn't college students from Cal Fullerton say, okay, we'll be that, we'll go that way. I've often used a baseball diamond illustration and mission of saying, first base, that when church gets to first base, it's when you do something for them, whoever them are, for the others. And that can be a food pantry or a backpack ministry for the church kid, for the school kids or whatever. It's you're doing something for an audience that you're seeing out there that has need of something that you can provide. The second base is doing something with people, like maybe we'll go and do something with you guys. The third base is usually where you're in partnership and learning from them as equals rather than just sort of as standing together. And the home base one is the one that it's really hard for in a lot of churches, which is to say, I'm willing for the folks that we go into partnership with to completely change who we are. And it sounds like that's the sort of folks that you had, Alicia. They're saying, yep, you are the future. You can change who we are. Can you tell us a little bit about that and they're willing, and with a population that's going to turn over every 4 years too, if it's college based.
Yeah, so we didn't have too many college people come in. They would come in once in a while. But more than anything, I think what brought life to the church was, one, I didn't really, doesn't sound terrible, but I didn't give them too much time to think, right? I just said, hey, I changed the logo, here it is. I said, hey, I changed the website, look at it, it looks fantastic. Hey, look at all these kids that are coming to these events, it's fun. And I think even though they may have protested if they had too much time to think, once they realized that things were looking better, things were feeling better, old faces were returning, they said, this isn't what I'm used to, and it's fast, but it's fun.
And the fast part is the part that doesn't necessarily fit the Presbyterian model too much. And so putting them into another gear, I think, was a sense of, I feel the call and the transition coming. I thank you so much for that. To me, I've always been, for good or for ill, as a Presbyterian, ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of gal. And that can really play out well in your ministry sometimes, to say, I mean, it's a risk. But if you really have some folks who say, I solidly see this growing wind of the Holy Spirit here, let's try it, and be willing to be humble and back up if it slams against a wall. I think it's good. There were some other questions. Anyone else have another one they either want to post or bring up with me? I backed up to saying financial condition. Oh, let me ask for a show of hands or a thumbs up or whatever on the reactions buttons of how many of you are from congregations that are struggling and that you would love to find a way to partner yourselves with something brand new, that in the ways that both Beth and Alicia have said. Yep, there go the thumbs. That's what I think. It's sort of, can't you bring something here and plant it here and let it grow? We are, I'm working a lot in referring to Nikki Collins and to Sarah, the notion of, we have a lot of yards in which you guys can plant if it seems like it's helpful and not burdensome to the ministry. And the other thing that it can do, I think, is offer some longevity to some of the plants that are struggling after a 3-year funding cycle. And do they so?
Before I go,
Uh-huh.
Nancy Donald did ask a good question about the financial condition of Morningside.
Yep.
The building is paid for. It's been paid for a while, so we don't have to worry about that. And the small members that were still there, they were still very happy givers, so they gave. We also had the preschool. The preschool was always well staffed. There was always a waiting list, which is why I wanted to make sure that the teachers were happy that we got things remodeled, renovated. And then there was also the grant from the presbytery of $150,000. More importantly, though, when COVID hit, we used a PPP loan,
Yep.
the forgiveness loans. So that also helped us out a lot. So at no point were we ever under. So that was good. But definitely the fact that the building was paid for and that the people were still willing to give because they saw that the ministry was going well.
Good. Go ahead, Nancy. Okay.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, that the financial state really is driving some of these struggling church options with limited time to even build something new like a parallel start or other options. So I was curious about that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Have to go, everyone. Bye. If you have any questions.
Bye, Alicia. Okay. We're about to wrap up too. I do want to say, he mentioned the PPP loans, that something that I think a lot of our churches aren't aware of, and the Newcastle Presbytery just hosted a group yesterday with the Alliant group that they've changed, the feds have changed the rules on their employee retention credits. I don't know if you're even familiar with those, but if you had a PPP loan, or even if you didn't, and it didn't cover, the full base of things, and you can show that you lost attendance, that you lost program capacity, either your own or like preschools or things like that, you have until, it was supposed to be over the end of September, they extended to the end of December this year to just do a first filing on saying, I'd like to work out what it is that we would qualify for. I'm on the board of Zephyr Point, one of our conference centers, and we just got several $100,000 back because, we hadn't known about it for that long. We had done a PPP loan and had to let a lot of people go, but the people that we kept and the programs that we lost all got put into the mix of that. And if you contact, I wish I had the link, I don't. Newcastle Presbytery has the link to the Alliant group, which works on contingency basis with you to help you file just in time. And then it doesn't cost you a penny to do it unless and until there's an award back, and then they take a percentage of the award, which was a basic, very fair, very low level contingency fee, if you're interested. That's called the Employee Retention Act. So we're done for the day. It went fast. It always does. Next week, again, for those who came in later, is bivocational campuses, which I think will hit a lot of you who are saying, oh, if only something new could come in and we don't know what it is. One of the greatest programs that we have going at the Presbyterian Foundation is Project Regeneration. They are about coming in and looking at properties, assessing market values of what you have, what it would cost to renovate, weighing, what are the best options here, looking at completely big transformations of properties into other forms of ministry. They have a good track record with those all over the country. And then at the smaller end of that scale, as I said, is looking at a typical aging congregation that found a way to maximize their campus in ways that make them stable and thriving. So I look for you again next Thursday, same time, same place. You all have a happy Halloween in the meantime, and it'll be November. All right, bye-bye.